You can never get to God. You can never fully understand what God is. That will always be unavailable to you. The same way that quality can't be defined. If you're a materialist, that's unacceptable. You have to get to it. God doesn't exist. It's a completely material, and someday we're going to find that particle. I think that getting to the particle is a fool's errand.
So we're back to just the betweenness. I mean, it seems to be like one of the best words. Relationality is another one, but maybe slightly more obscure, to describe everything that we can experience. Well, maybe it's in the book, right? Leila means the divine play, something like that. Or I don't recall if that was in the book or we figured that out. But
at one point, Persig says that it is like lilac, and the woman's name is, the way with the woman's name is pronounced as Leila. In the audiobook, it's Leila, but there's that implication of it being Leila. So, I find people pronounce it both ways, and I think they're both valid.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think it was on purpose. Well, I appreciate you doing this. I mean, this is one of those books that has, I don't know, it just cemented itself in my mind. Like, I feel like every book that I read now, there's some interpretive layer of Persig on it. And I had read Zen probably in 2016, 2017. And I thought it was good, but it didn't leave as much of an impression on me as Leila. And I know you've been a big thinker and reader on both. So are we good to go, Mike? Okay, so we're already going. I don't know if you have any questions or anything, or we'll just jump right in.
Sure, let's just jump right in.
Yeah. I don't think anything that I'll ask you today is probably nothing too surprising. Maybe some of the overlap with me. I think there's some overlap between Mises and Persig. That's interesting. That might be a little surprising, but yeah, maybe we could just start with what was your journey into discovering Persig's work, and how has it left an imprint on you?
Okay, well, I think right around the time you read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, I think I read it, maybe 2015 I read it. And so there was a whole convergence of intellectual influences for me right in that year. And I think that you just talked to Guy Senstock, so you're aware of that little corner of the internet, which is very influenced by Jordan Peterson. So it hadn't really been formed yet, the little corner, but that was the periphery right about 2015, 2016. It all exploded with that C16 video he did. But right about that time, I was, I guess, one of those people in the periphery who was really beginning to get into Jordan Peterson. And I cannot say whether I read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance first or discovered him first. It was really parallel. So there was a kind of way I was beginning to see things that opened me up to wanting to read that book for some reason, and I can't even tell you exactly why, but it was so interesting the way it all lined up. So that shift in metaphysics, that different understanding that we talk about all the time nowadays. I know you talk about it a lot, and they talk about it in the corner. That shift from a subject-object dualistic thinking to value-based metaphysics it hit me like a ton of bricks. It was just so amazing. The book was really hard to understand, and that's why I began the channel, because I knew there was something there that was so valuable. And I wanted to hold myself accountable to actually studying it, and I felt like the only way to do that was, to kind of be accountable on, in a YouTube channel, so people would actually be looking at it, and I'd feel like I'd have to do something, I'd feel like I'd have to continue to pursue this rather than read it and say, oh, that's cool, and then, get a little bit out of it. And that really, I think, solidified how much this took over my whole understanding. And another thing, I want to bring back Jordan Peterson into this, because right around that time, since I was looking at all his videos, all he was doing at that point was doing online. He was filming his online lectures. And the reason I got into him was because I'm a therapist, so I wanted to understand Jung, and we were bringing in. I had a group with a therapy group that was based on spirituality, and meaning was helping people improve their lives. So I was getting into Viktor Frankl and people like that, and of course, meaning is Jordan Peterson's whole thing. So I discovered a video that he had recorded before he did all these online lectures, which is called, it's something like, it's not matter, it's meaning. It's got a different title, but he said it's, reality isn't matter, reality is meaning. And so it lined right up with Persig. So I
think he says realities, you can conceive of it as made up of matter or what matters.
Yeah, what matters. That's it. Thank you. That's right. That's exactly what it was. So that just opened up the whole can of worms. And, I just pursued it for several years and made a whole lot of friends and joined the little corner of the internet. And that's that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Somewhat like you, maybe slightly different timeline, but I discovered Peterson in 2017, 2018. Going through, like many young men at the time, I was going through some adversity, and I found his emphasis on taking responsibility, being in radical truth, all of these things to be very useful in helping me get through that adversity and grow from it. And also opened me up. I think he was the gateway drug to, John Vervaeke, and then John Vervaeke opens you up to everyone, and so yourself included. And so, it's been quite a journey. I think it does change you quite a bit. If I look back at myself from, I guess that's 8 years ago, just how many things have changed, the way I see the world, the way I think about the world. I remember back then I had read a lot of astrophysics and stuff as a teenager. And so I had this very materialist, scientific, reductionist worldview, thinking that, obviously it gets down into the quantum where things are a little bit more blurry, but I thought that there was some fundamental, particles and some theory of everything that we were going to achieve at some point. And now I just think that's utter nonsense, right? There's no way that you could ever contain the totality of reality inside of any framework or proposition. So, is it, so when you talk about that difference between, looking at reality as matter or looking at reality as what matters, it sounds like it's almost a restatement of objective subjective divide. Is there a difference between that? Like when Peterson's talking about what matters, what's relevant, what's valuable, what's meaningful, are we just talking about the subjective domain, or is there more to it than that?
Well, I think, Vervaeke has a great word, and you've used it before, which is transjective, which means there can't be a subject really without something to perceive. And that unification of subjective and objective is what creates reality. So Persig says that there really is only one reality, which is that moment of perception of quality. He calls it gosh, no, it's failing me, unfortunately. But the moment that the subject perceives of the object, that transjective relationship. So you can't really be aware that there is a subject without an object, and an object cannot exist without a subject.
Exactly.
Which means they can't be floating off in space separately and just identifying each other, or the mind finally identifies something that's always been there and it always will be that way, and therefore if you mine down low enough, you're going to get to the bottom of that thing that's always been there. It's not like that at all.
Yeah, and there's also this sort of I read a book called The Blind Spot. It was a Vervaeke recommendation, and it was sort of arguing that same point in multiple domains, that we can never get outside of ourselves, right? So that everything that we are saying about reality ultimately is through the lens of a subjective acting human. And so that the bottom of experience for us ultimately is just human experience. There's no place to stand outside of to, make some metaphysical claim about reality. And so it's almost like, is it that we're metaphysically, probably we should try to define these terms too. Metaphysics is a notoriously difficult word for people, myself included, just the nature of being itself. Are we saying something like that our fundamental metaphysical reality is just that we're trapped in our human acting selves? Or are we saying something more about an external reality?
Well, I think what you're saying, my reaction to that is we certainly have limitations, right? Because we're biological beings, and Persig would say that we are, the basis of our biology is in the inorganic, but we contain all four layers. We have this organic substructure, if you want, but what we really are is a confluence of biological, social, and intellectual patterns.
Yes. And just for people that are listening, those are the four layers, right? Inorganic, biological, social, intellectual, in ascending order. And then above all of that is the ineffable dynamic quality.
Dynamic quality, yeah. And Mike Hill did a great job. That's a nice series. It really lays it out in a way that people can understand. Yeah, he is. It's really, I'm so happy you guys did that. but that, I'm sorry.
No, that's it. Please go ahead.
No, but that means, that, there's a certain limitation. This is, potential exists for anything imaginable. It's infinite. And this is how potential has manifested in the human being. So there's going to be a certain limitation. Yeah. So that's what we are. We are limited within this, but you were saying, is there something beyond? And
does it restrict our access to saying something about reality beyond ourselves? I guess is the question I'm wrestling with.
I think that if you're looking at it materialistically, you can pursue that you think that that's what it is. That's what the metaphysics is, that there's a reality beyond ourselves. And we are fortunate to have the, intellectual capacity to find it. And someday we will, it's in the strings, or it's even further down, or even further down. But I think that since that this model or the way of looking at reality as quality means that really at the bottom of everything, that is the metaphysics. At the bottom of everything is just value, and how those manifest are going to manifest in whatever ways they do. And this is how they manifest for us as people in all these spiritual texts. And one I want to point out in this little corner, one of the key figures, you have Peterson, you have Peterson sort of informing all of us, but it's Paul van der Klee, the Calvinist, or the Protestant minister. You have Jonathan Pageau, and you have John Vervaeke. Jonathan Pageau is being an Orthodox, he's informed by this very early form of Christianity, which is influenced by Platonism. And in that understanding, and this is with Eastern understanding too, you can never get to God. You can never fully understand what God is. That will always be unavailable to you. The same way that quality can't be defined, the same way that the Tao can't be defined. And if you are operating in the metaphysics with the metaphysics of quality, this is something you accept. You accept this as something that gives you the quality to go forward, but is not necessary to completely discover. And isn't, it's a fool's errand to do that. In subject-object metaphysics, that's unacceptable. So I think it really depends on where, what you feel, what your belief is in terms of reality.
If you're anything like me, you understand that Bitcoin is something we can use every day to connect, to collaborate, and to build stronger, freer communities. As true Bitcoiners, you all know we are each responsible for onboarding more Bitcoiners. That's why I chose to partner with Cowbolt, an expense splitting app that settles in Bitcoin. It can be as simple as splitting a dinner bill. Your friend covers dinner and you reimburse them, but you send it back to him in Bitcoin. Now your friend has their first sats, and as I always say, where your money goes, the mind follows. By using Cowbolt to get Bitcoin into the hands of your friends and family, you can help us orange pill the world. Cowbolt is built to let you split costs, share expenses, and settle instantly, while always keeping full control of your keys. Cowbolt is simple, social, non-custodial, exactly how Bitcoin was meant to be used. If you're serious about Bitcoin, it's time to act like it. Download Cowbolt today on iOS or Android. To learn more, go to cowbolt.com. Again, that's Cowbolt, COWBOLT.com. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE.
I think we were talking about, is there an ultimate reality we can get to?
There we go.
An external reality.
Seems like a nice lightweight jumping in point.
And I was saying that with something like the Metaphysics of Quality, there isn't, because you can't, quality is not something you're ever going to be able to define. The same way that, in the spiritual traditions, you're never going to get all the way to God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's accepted. That's accepted if you see things in that point of view. If you're a materialist, that's unacceptable. You have to get to it. God doesn't exist. It's it's completely material, and someday we're going to find that particle. And my opinion, you know which metaphysics I follow. So I think that getting to the particle is a fool's errand. What do you think?
Well, it always occurs to me that we're trapped in language, and when we say getting to that ultimate reality, I mean, it seems to me that the ultimate reality is as simple as sitting in meditation and clearing your mind of thoughts. All right, just being in the pure present moment. But then the other interpretation maybe of get to the ultimate reality is to define or in some way delimit or map ultimate reality in a way that's shareable. And so I don't think that seems possible to me. I subscribe to the old saying that the map can never be the territory kind of thing. And all of our thoughts, our language, anything that we're trying to do to compress raw experience into something that can be communicated and shared is somehow not the raw experience itself. It's not the territory. And so, yeah, I think getting to it is like, well, you are it, right? You are nature unfolding. I heard someone say once, like, we are the universe engaged in self-reflection, something like that. And so maybe it's as simple as that. That would probably resonate well with Hinduism and other, religion philosophies that prize the value of meditation. But I don't know, like, to actually try and capture it all. I don't, maybe that's like the wrong metaphor, even get to is like, well, what do you mean in that metaphor? Is it like a place, like a new territory you've conquered, or is it a place you've arrived at experientially? It seems like we can arrive there experientially, but I don't think we can conquer it and compress it into some mappable place.
I think that's right. So are you what, so you've explored meditation in this regard is for that reason?
Well, before this, I was into yoga, and then yoga got me into meditation, and that was its own kind of endeavor. But then as I've gotten more into this little corner of the internet and some of these texts, I find, in many of these traditions, they arrive at that, in the Neoplatonism, it's the one or the good, right? The ineffable ultimate source of all things. What is something Vervaeke might say, citing someone, I'm not sure, it's neither the knower nor the known, but by the process by which the known becomes known, or the unknown becomes known. So it's always this betweenness kind of ontology, this relational ontology that seems true for me, and that all of our mapping tools, language, mathematics, even money, these are, they're relational tools, right? Words are defined in terms of other words, numbers are defined in terms of other numbers. Money is this real economic relation between people, basically. So we're using these different instruments to try and map something that's fundamentally relational, and that gets very confusing with Vervaeke talks about the relation being ontologically prior to the things that are related, which I think he calls the relata. And that's difficult. All right, it's difficult for our brains to conceive of that. I struggle with that one a lot. Like, how can the relationship between things exist before the things themselves exist? But then I think that that's probably just a limitation of our own cognition. Like, we need things to be in discrete data packets called things so that our computer can work, basically. So it's very hard for us to conceive of what's ontologically prior to that.
Well, that is the basis of Persig's philosophy, is that pre-intellectual experience, that spontaneous experience when quality hits, which we can't determine, which, if you're looking at free will and determinism, that is determined. You're not going to be able to decide what the next quality event, that's the term I was trying to get to. The quality event for Persig is the only true reality.
Yeah, and this is where I think I want to get deeper into this, because I'm also struck by the through line, if you will, between the words value. Obviously, value and quality are used somewhat interchangeably by Persig. You could correct me if I'm wrong there. And then when we get into the work of Mises and the Austrian school, which Mises's famous work is the book Human Action. And not to paraphrase what he says, is like, basically value is expressed solely through action, right? I could sit here and tell you I value this or value that, but it ultimately doesn't matter. It's, my actions that speak louder than my words. And so I think that might, in terms of trying to get to the bottom of reality or what we're capable of doing, it might be that it is something as practical as the economics explored by Mises, that it is just human action that's at bottom. Sorry, I had a mic change. Did that change for you?
No, I hear you.
Okay, cool. And so, yeah, as Persig is saying, this quality or value event is the primary, it's the pre-intellectual cutting edge of reality. I think he says at some point in the book. Human action is also that thing, right? It's only through human action. It is through action that the mind and reality come into contact, and then we start to categorize it. So like that, there's that pre-intellectual cutting edge that is value or action itself, and then there come the categorical structures, which are really just means to an end, right? So it could be subject-object, could be other things. And so I think we've inherited the subject-object duality just culturally, and over time these things become invisibilized to us, right? We just take them for granted. Vervaeke often cites the metaphor of putting on the glasses. So we just look at the world through the glasses of subject-object duality, and it blinds us to the to the more intuitive truth, really, that subjects and objects don't exist. It's like, well, so at some point in the book, Persig's making the point about a professor, I think, like if you reconstructed him of all of his atoms, you know, would that make him the professor? It's like, well, you objectively created him, but there's all his subjective experience and thought that wouldn't necessarily be there. And so I wanted to read an excerpt. I don't know if you wanted to respond to that, but there's a little bit of an excerpt here at the beginning of chapter 8 that just to like give Persig's actual language some room to breathe, and hopefully he says it better than I struggle to say it. So I was going to share that with the audience.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Oh, it's a little bit of a long one, but I hope it's useful for the rest of our conversation here. This is the very beginning of chapter 8. Persig writes, "The idea that the world is composed of nothing but moral value sounds impossible at first." And again, I think you could sort of, when I read the word value, I'm also swapping in action, and it still makes sense for me because I conceive of action as that which expresses value, basically. So the idea that the world is composed of nothing but moral value sounds impossible at first. Only objects are supposed to be real. Quote unquote quality is supposed to be just a vague fringe word that tells what we think about objects. The whole idea that quality can create objects seems very wrong. But we see subjects and objects as reality for the same reason we see the world right side up, although the lenses of our eyes actually present it to our brains upside down. We get so used to certain patterns of interpretation, we forget the patterns are there. And a little bit further down, he writes, "The culture in which we live hands us a set of intellectual glasses to interpret experience with, and the concept of the primacy of subjects and objects is built right into these glasses. If someone sees through a somewhat different set of glasses, or, God help him, takes his glasses off, the natural tendency of those who still have their glasses on is to regard his statements as somewhat weird, if not actually crazy. But he isn't. The idea that values create objects gets less and less weird as you get used to it. Modern physics, on the other hand, gets more and more weird as you get into it, and indications are that this weirdness will increase. In either case, however, weirdness isn't the test of truth. As Einstein said, common sense, non-weirdness, is just a bundle of prejudices acquired before the age of 18. The tests of truth are logical consistency, agreement with experience, and economy of explanation. The metaphysics of quality satisfies these. The metaphysics of quality subscribes to what is called empiricism. It claims that all legitimate human knowledge arises from the senses or by thinking about what the senses provide. Most empiricists deny the validity of any knowledge gained through imagination, authority, tradition, or purely theoretical reasoning. They regard fields such as art, morality, religion, and metaphysics as unverifiable. The metaphysics of quality varies from this by saying that the values of art and morality and even religious mysticism are verifiable, and that in the past they have been excluded for metaphysical reasons, not empirical ones. They have been excluded because of the metaphysical assumption that all the universe is composed of subjects and objects, and anything that can't be classified as a subject or an object isn't real. There is no empirical evidence for this assumption at all. It's just an assumption." So yeah, sorry for the long excerpt there, but just this seems to be kind of the central idea that a lot of these works revolve around, is that subject-object duality is it's one way of categorizing and decomplexifying our experience, but it's not the only way. And just because it is a way doesn't make it, ontologically primary or true.
Yeah, I think it's I think that if your value is manipulating the physical environment efficiently, it definitely is the best way. But it's reduced within the value system, I think, right? there's value itself that's even informing this much narrower way of seeing reality. But we've been, there's a really good chapter in Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, chapter 3, where he's just beginning to touch on this. He's talking about the Native American ways of understanding, like Native Americans in his, not every single one, but in this particular case, this one kid who's a friend of Chris, they believe in ghosts. Mm-hmm. That particular, tribe at that time believes in ghosts. And he goes into saying, well, these conclusions of scientific experiments are also ghosts. They're just a different kind of ghost. And we hypnotize our kids in Western society to believe that those ghosts are real, and that these ghosts that the Native Americans believe in aren't. And that's what school is about. School is about hypnotizing kids to believe in the right ghosts.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, when you say it like that, it's comedic in a way, because things like, probability, even atoms, things that we think are actual structures of reality, these are really just models, right? That we've kind of we've imposed on reality to decomplexify it, make sense of it. But that's, that sounds like heresy to a scientist, even as I say it. But it does seem to be the case, right? There are different ways of modeling things. There's a book on quantum physics that I liked, The Dancing Wu Wei Masters, I think is what it's called. But it argues that a lot of, atomic and subatomic particles are basically wave interactions. So they're not actually, little billiard balls, but they're just, that was a model we used to decomplexify how waves interact at that level. And so, ghost, yeah. I mean,
so an atom is...
What is a ghost? Yeah.
Yeah. But that's a ghost we believe in. But we don't believe in the wave, we don't believe in the crest of the wave, let's say, as the atom.
Right. So what is it about, let's say, quality, value, or let's stick with quality and value for now. What is it? How is it that Persig is making the case that these are more real than any of these ghosts or models that we might be imposing on reality? How is it that his ontology is... How's he arguing that his ontology is, I don't know the right term here, superior, better, more real, more true?
Well, there's one section, and I think Mike Hill touched on this. There's a section where he puts up like serious philosophical quandaries. I think he calls them platypi, right? Things that we just can't resolve. And I've actually got a note of them. They are their free will. One of them's free will. Like the subject-object dichotomy, which we've kind of already touched on. It's not the subject, and not the object. It's the meeting. It's where the subject meets the object. That's reality, and so that's the metaphysics of quality proposes that's reality. Moral relativism versus absolutism. That's a value issue. Value that is looking at value from different. All these values are valuable to the level at which they originate. Like you could say. You could say that there's individual freedom versus fitting into society, right? And I think doesn't the Bitcoin philosophy tend towards the individual freedom?
Very much so, but somewhat paradoxically, it's by creating that permanently level playing field, which is kind of a communal value, right? It's we all play by the same rules, and that's what simultaneously optimizes the value for the individual, but also the whole. But yes, you're right. It's very libertarian, typically, in its ethos.
So I would say that that's probably on the social level, right? This is the optimal social value, because I think in Persig's work, if you're to point to consolidating all value, the highest value, and I'm still kind of thinking about this one, but it's freedom. There's freedom, and then which is illustrated by dynamic quality, and there's constraint, which is illustrated with the static patterns. So if you can't be completely free, like the character in Leila is completely free, and that's a big mess because she doesn't adhere to social values. She doesn't really, she's so I think the answer is that something like moral relativism and like these values exist within the level that they're created. Value itself is the same. It's just that each level has different patterns of value. So Persig would say that solves that problem. You're not talking about one value is better than the other. You're talking about looking at the value from the level it was created. So I think the answer to your question is that he thinks that the metaphysics of quality is superior because all these quandaries are solved by metaphysics of quality that traditional Western philosophy cannot solve. And that there isn't really a quandary you can't solve with metaphysics of quality. There isn't anything you can't understand through that lens. Whereas if you're trying to understand, this is why the platypus is the example. If you're trying to categorize the platypus as a mammal or a bird, good luck. You're just going to have to make a whole new category. But metaphysics of quality says this is an animal that exists, that has its own biological, it exists on the biological level. It has biological value. It's trying to perpetuate itself. It's trying to stay alive, So there is no quandary.
I see. Yeah. The platypus is like a metaphor for the intercategorical, right? That it's neither reptile nor bird nor mammal. It's I think it lays eggs. It's got a duck bill. It's got some web feet. It's got all these different things. Yeah. And I think there's somewhere in the book too, correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't look this up, but I think he makes the case where like an epidemiologist or someone that's trying to, stop a viral pandemic, for instance, would be from the level of the organic, right? The actual virus itself would conceive of this epidemiologist as like a genocidal maniac, right? It's like, oh, this guy is trying to destroy all my viral brothers and sisters. And then, but from our level, the social level, like we see that as a very distinct social good, that, oh, clearly we need to eradicate this virus that's harming us. So that it doesn't, he introduces these Darwinian elements, but they're stratified by these levels, and that it does resolve a lot of conflict, I think.
Yeah. Because for the virus, the highest value is killing us all, or using us as hosts or whatever it wants to do, right?
Right.
It's overtaking us. And so morally, as human beings, our morality says, no, it's us that want to stay alive. So we need to figure out with science, which is the study of patterns of value, we need to study this pattern and squash it, kill it. Right. So our values are in conflict with the virus, but the value itself is exactly the same. We're both trying to transcend, restrictions on our level. Yes. We're both trying to be as free as we can be. And for us to be more free, we need less diseases.
Yes.
For the virus to be more free, it needs to be able to populate us.
Yes. Would you rather have 1 Bitcoin today or 2 Bitcoin a few years from now? Bitcoin mining is a tried and true strategy for accumulating Bitcoin. Over a 2 to 4 year time frame, successful miners have consistently accumulated more Bitcoin than they otherwise would with a traditional dollar cost average strategy. Blockware mining as a service enables you to start mining Bitcoin from your laptop. Blockware handles everything from securing the miners to sourcing low-cost power to configuring the mining pool. They do it all. Plus, with Blockware's one-of-a-kind mining marketplace, you can buy and sell live Bitcoin miners with just a few keystrokes. In this marketplace, buyers get to purchase live machines at vetted facilities, enabling them to mine with zero lead time. And sellers get the opportunity to liquidate their machines and hosting contracts at will. This means you can mine Bitcoin with zero long-term commitment and high liquidity on your mining rigs. Blockware will even cover your energy bill for 1 week per mining rig when you sign up at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. Again, that's 1 free week of Bitcoin mining at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. And on top of this offer, you can also use code BREEDLOVE to get $100 off your first mining rig with Blockware Solutions. Bitcoin custody is evolving. Onramp is pioneering a new model, multi-institution custody, which eliminates single points of failure and adds fault tolerance to your setup. With Onramp's multi-institution custody, your funds are auditable on-chain, cannot be rehypothecated, and can only be moved with your explicit direction. Multi-institution custody simplifies private key management, providing unparalleled peace of mind for you and your loved ones. Onramp also helps you seamlessly tap into financial services like trading, inheritance, loans, and more, all without compromising on accessibility. So schedule a consultation with the Onramp team today to learn more at onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. Again, that's onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. Interesting. It's just occurring to me too that these layers, so again, in ascending order, the inorganic, the biological, the social, and the intellectual, you're also moving from the objective towards the subjective, right? That subjective tends to be more that intellectual domain, and the objective, traditionally conceived, tends to be more of the material domain.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I think he's got a chart in which he puts biology and inorganic in the objective domain, and social and intellectual in the objective and the subjective. So that goes back to the question you read, the quote that you read, which is that these subjective patterns are just as real as the biological and inorganic patterns. It's just that they exist at different levels of evolution.
Right. Yes. I also find it's very entertaining to me to think about Bitcoin through that lens, because it kind of hits every layer, right? It's, in the inorganic, it's converting raw energy. It consumes raw energy basically to have the integrity of its supply, 21 million, which is really the highest intellectual pattern of it. And then, it's appealing to individual self-preservation. So the biological layer, it's serving, Darwinian self-interest basically. And then it also coheres us at the social layer because it's that common rule set or that level playing field that we all abide. And again, just relationality between, looking at it through the lens of Bitcoin or money kind of shows you the relationality between the layers as it pertains to us, which I think is fascinating. There's another
can I say
quote here?
One more
please.
About that. The way you describe Bitcoin as the level playing field, that would be a situation, that would be a social pattern of value that allows the most access to freedom for the most individuals, yes, which makes it a very superior dynamic, a social pattern that can let in dynamic quality as needed is the highest level, is the freest level. And what you're saying is individual sovereignty through Bitcoin, if you're talking about, money, is a very, very high level social pattern in the Persigian understanding.
That's right. Yeah, I think perhaps the highest one we've stumbled upon yet. And therefore it is reconstructive to all of our existing social patterns, of social institutions, or, possibly even morality, to the extent that incentives shape morality over time. That's clearly that one's a bit more theoretical. Like we don't have, it's hard, it'll take a long time to see how that plays out, but there's a lot of people, myself included, that talk about the promise of Bitcoin to be a incentive towards more peaceful and prosperous interaction rather than coercive interaction, just by virtue of it being hard to steal, impossible to inflate, all of these things.
Well, I noticed, I listened to it was really good. You did this great reading of Ayn Rand. That was a nice video with those graphics. Fabulous. Yeah,
she's fantastic.
But from my understanding of that is that she was saying, you need to money has to represent actual work and actual work. It can't represent something, it can't go off in this direction of abstraction where it's corrupted.
Sure.
And you have to move it back into it being a representation, like I think you said, of economic relationality between people, versus a mode of controlling society, I think is what it's become, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think this is a challenge really with any representational system or any meaning-making or linguistic system, right? Is how do you verify that the symbol is mapping onto that which it is symbolizing, right? And when you start the printing of money thing is like, well, it's supposed to be symbolizing the goods and services, which is in economics, economists call it purchasing power. If the money doesn't represent the purchasing power and you just start printing it, well, then whoever's printing it is stealing purchasing power from whoever's saving it. So you've destroyed the symbolic value, which is more, that sounds a little too lightweight in its consequences, but in destroying the symbolic value of money is like destroying the symbolic value of language. If all of a sudden if we don't have consensus on the definitions of words, well, then we're not going to cooperate at all, and then the whole world falls apart, basically.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, because you have to go back to what the quality event that determined the quality event, the moment that it was recognized that you could offset labor into a token of some sort, right?
Yes, exactly.
That's the quality event. So you want to get as close to that as possible. And once it veers off from that and goes on to its own little system, what I think Persig would call it, he would call the way money is now, I think, a cultural immune system, that it's so removed now from its original quality event that it's become this pathological thing in itself, and that it's guarded because the gatekeepers are trying to guard that new understanding of it.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I think to rephrase it, perhaps in economics jargon, the money needs to be costly to produce. That's what safeguards it from being overproduced. And then fiat currency is the opposite of that, right? There's zero production costs, so the central bank can just print as much as they want and steal as much purchasing power as they want until the currency fails, until the currency hyperinflates. So there needs to be, it's just kind of just like the dynamic tension between static and dynamic quality. There needs to be that in at least money. I'm not sure how this pertains to language as much. I guess the dynamic tension in language would be, you can't just make up new words willy-nilly, right? They have to be socially accepted. So there's a tension process there. You can't just inflate the language at will. So yeah, the money needs to be costly to produce so that it can be trustworthy to safeguard the purchasing power that is secured into it. And if that relationship breaks down, well, then the money breaks down.
Yeah, and then that's, I think Peterson said that you can't just make up a bunch of, names and pronouns for yourself and decide.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And I think, like the pronoun thing is an interesting analogy, because most of these pronouns broke down and went away. They only exist in like a fringe culture immune system now. whereas
Yeah.
there was an attempt to make them, to enforce them on society. And
Yes.
but however, there was some dynamic quality in what happened, because then you do kind of develop the they them, which kind of stuck around.
Mm-hmm.
Because in a way that did kind of reflect a quality event for some people who don't feel one way or the other.
Yes.
And so
Ye-
so all the bullshit broke down, and the thing that was valuable remained, I think, is a way of looking at it.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. It's the opponent processing, to use another term. I really like it for Vervaeke's. You'll have a lot of casualties in that opponent processing, right? All the LBGTQ plus, all that went away, but maybe you're left with a they them. And maybe that is necessary. I know in other languages they do have, that was already part of other languages, essentially, that's something that was absent in English. And that makes sense, but that's interesting that, you can have terminological hyperinflation as well. Like
Totally.
you just produce so many terms, they go to no meaning, and then they go out of existence.
Yep. And
it's the same thing. If you print so much of the currency, it just has no meaning, and then it goes out of existence.
Yeah, and if there isn't a basis for something, it ultimately will go out of existence, which I think is very frightening for us right now, right?
Yeah.
Unless you own Bitcoin.
True that. Okay, I want to try to draw a little bit of this connection between, let's say, the fact that subject-object duality is not ontologically primary. It's just one way of decomplexifying the world. It's one way of categorizing our experience. And obviously we inherited this from Descartes, right? I think, therefore I am. So that was like kind of the subjective-objective divide that we're still dealing with, I think, in our culture and our whole orientation to the world. But obviously that's not the case. And now, Persig is one guy that's highlighted this. I would also, Gibson's book, An Ecological Approach to Visual Perception. This is from the 60s or 70s, I think. This is the guy that coined the term affordances, which are, possibilities for real action, basically. Vervaeke often cites the example of graspability, for instance. Is the graspability in the bottle or is it in my hand? It's like, well, it's not in the bottle because an ant can't grasp it. And it's not in my hand because my hand can't grasp North America. The graspability is a real relation, a real fitness relation, or a possibility for action between the hand and the bottle, right? A particular hand and a particular bottle, which is really important. And in that book, Gibson's book, An Ecological Approach to Visual Perception, he repeatedly says affordances are neither objective nor subject, neither objective nor subjective. And he says that repeatedly. And so there is this deeper, we'll use Vervaeke's word, transjective, right? Transjectivity seems to be primary to subject-object duality. And the most important things, like the biggest ideas that we have tapped into, seem to be transjective, right? Vervaeke, again, often cites the example of evolution, right? Like, well, was it objective or subjective? Well, you have selection pressures in the environment that are objective, you got to breathe, eat, survive, reproduce. But then there's mate selection, which is the other half of that equation. That's subjective. So evolution itself is neither one, it's both, or neither, whichever way you want to look at it. And so all of that I found to be very interesting. And then I discovered the link that crystallized for me was, I want to read this passage from a book called Economic Science and the Austrian Method by Hoppe. Hoppe is a student of Mises. I think this book was written a bit later, probably in the 90s or early 2000s. And it's slightly esoteric, but I want to just offer it here because I think he tapped into something really important. And it's going to lead us into this idea that human action itself is the primary thing. And that might be the connection to Persig's work of, value being primary, quality being primary, et cetera. So if you will indulge me, I will read this this excerpt here.
Sure, right.
So Hopper writes, and I'll throw in a few terms here that aren't necessarily important that we can gloss over, but I'll try to reflect on those after I read the passage here. Hopper writes, consider, for example, this programmatic statement of his. And I think he's referring to Kant here. So far it has been assumed that our knowledge had to conform to observational reality. Instead, it should be assumed that observational reality conform to our knowledge. Mises provides the solution to this challenge. It is true, as Kant says, that true synthetic a priori propositions are grounded in self-evident axioms, and that these axioms have to be understood by reflection upon ourselves rather than being in any meaningful sense observable. Yet we have to go one step further. We must recognize that such necessary truths are not simply categories of our mind, but that our mind is one of acting persons. Our mental categories have to be understood as ultimately grounded in categories of action. And as soon as this is recognized, all idealistic suggestions immediately disappear. Instead, an epistemology claiming the existence of true synthetic a priori propositions becomes a realistic epistemology. Since it is understood as ultimately grounded in categories of action, the gulf between the mental and the real, outside physical world, is bridged. As categories of action, they must be mental things as much as they are characteristics of reality. For it is through actions that the mind and reality make contact. And so, man, I guess I could just jump into, well, I guess I'll pause there. That's a little bit dense, but if I can try to unpack it for the sake of making the connection, Mises defines action as the purposeful use of means to pursue valued ends. And he's basically arguing that it's almost like this is the pre-intellectual cutting edge of reality, right? Way before humans were using language or mental categories, we were using means to pursue ends, right? We were using a stick to hunt an animal or whatever the thing may have been. And so he's basically saying that this is the primary reality. Again, Hoppe is saying this about Mises's work. And so I think that, I don't know, I guess I'll throw it over to you. Like, the possible connection between Persig identifying value as ontologically primary, and then Mises's work saying, well, human action is ontologically primary, but action is also said to be the sole way we express value, right? I can tell you that I value diet and exercise, but if I don't take care of myself and I eat fruity pebbles every day and I don't exercise, well, then my actions speak louder than my words, and I'm in a performative contradiction. And I guess the last thing I'll leave you with that is the reason Mises says that human action is axiomatic is because if you try to create an argument against it, if you try to refute it, that you're actually using the means of argumentation or words to the end of refuting the axiom of action. Therefore, you're engaged in a performative contradiction. So basically all conscious activity is action. So you can't argue your way out of it. You're always doing it.
Yeah, I think when you say conscious activity is action, that solves the whole action problem, right? It's not just physical action, it's also mental, intellectual action. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that the comparison in Persig would be that once the quality event occurs, an analogy will emerge. And that analogy, it might be mental, right? It might be an idea, or it could be running away from a tiger. Because you know from the past, you know from what you already know, that that quality event, that low quality event of seeing the tiger's teeth, means you have to run or you'll be eaten. You know, that's an analogy to what we already know. an idea will, that's going to be an analogy to whatever we again, to what every analogy has to be that. So the action of creating the analogy is an action, whatever level it's occurring at. But I would go back to what you said about Fruity Pebbles and eating right. That would be your intellectual level valuing. Your intellectual level has a value for healthy food, but your biology prefers Fruity Pebbles.
That was all of advertising summed up in a nutshell right there. Yeah, so then we exist in dynamic tension between all these levels, even within ourselves.
Absolutely. That's what makes
it. So it's not that's interesting. That sort of gets back to my very early question where it's like, are we talking about ourselves or something outside the world? But it's both, right? Like, that's why I guess this framework is so powerful.
Well, you said that it's really the lens. So you could say that if you see it as something outside of you, and that's the belief system, then that's what it is. So I think it goes back to the way you understand reality, because I think a materialist would say, under no circumstance are we creating objects. They already exist, and they exist outside of us, and we were not here, and the universe had these laws of physics, and they've always been like this, and there you go. But I think that if you're looking at it from this alternative point of view, which I think we share, it would mean, and you said something, I think it was in the Mike Hill episode, you said the data didn't change, but our interpretation did.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, that I also will credit Vervaeke. He gives the example of Copernicus, that for, I don't know, tens of thousands of years, we watched the sun rising and setting. So all of that data we had accumulated, and all of the consensus, right? Everyone sees the same thing happening over and over again, and we all agree that the sun's going around the earth, right? It's clear as day, so to speak. It's literally going around us day in, day out, until Copernicus comes along armed with some very rigorous mathematics, and he goes, actually, everyone's wrong. You're all wrong. All of the data and all of your consensus since the beginning of time is wrong, right? The earth is actually going around the sun. And so that the data didn't change, right? The data is exactly the same, but the interpretation completely inverted the perspective, which is just, I use that example oftentimes to describe how theory is the filter by which you interpret data, right? And so the theory they're both important, but the theory really determines what you see in a way, not just how you see it, but what you see. Like I guess you see the exact same thing, but you're seeing it in the exact opposite way when the theory changes.
Yeah, and that's what's working for us now, right? It works for us now to feel like we're just a little speck in this vast universe because we're looking for the God particle, the particle, because that's the value system. But at one time, and no less valuable, was the geocentric notion. And effectively, and this is what Pajot says, he says, okay, the earth isn't flat when you go to outer space and look at it, but for us it's flat. It's effectively like that, and that's how we operate in the day-to-day world. And on this intellectual level, biologically we operate on a flat earth, and but intellectually in science we don't. And I think like going further with the sun, you could say that, well, the sun was there before we were, therefore there's some external force. But if you're looking at a value-based metaphysics, the reason the sun even formed to begin with inorganically was inorganic value. There's something about, the
Yes.
condensation of something into a sphere that is organically valuable for, let's just say, for the freedom of this mass of inorganic substance to move more freely.
Mm-hmm.
So in the Metaphysics of Quality, I think, I'm sorry, I'm thinking while I'm talking, but that external thing is not external. It's the substrate, which is value. And we're just a manifestation of that many millions of years later, but there's a through line. It's all a through line. It's all interconnected.
Yes. One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably get it. You get that Bitcoin changes everything. For those of us that get it, it is important that we use a smart way to buy and hold Bitcoin. My friends at Coinbits, the oldest Bitcoin-only exchange in the United States, have recently pioneered the concept of roundups, which lets you turn your spare change into Bitcoin. Simply connect your payment cards and all your purchases will be rounded up to the nearest dollar, letting you stack sats without even thinking about it. My favorite feature is Coinbits Plus. For $10 a month, you get the best spreads on Bitcoin, which lets power users save on fees and buy even more Bitcoin. All that, plus peer-to-peer payments, target orders, price alerts, and more, means you can do almost anything you want to do with Bitcoin using Coinbits. So go to coinbits.app/breedlove to sign up today. Again, that's coinbits.app, coinbits.app/breedlove. I think Mises may have been understating, his magnum opus is titled Human Action. It is with great difficulty that we draw the line between living and non-living systems. Mm-hmm. You brought up a star. That's a great example, right? It's got a life cycle. It's, there's many different types of stars. There's all the opponent processing, right? Which we see, like we have it between our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system that determines our state of arousal. Well, stars have it between gravity and nuclear fusion pushing out, right? There's a balance between them. And the common line that's drawn between living and non-living systems is autopoiesis, or like a system that actually seeks out the conditions that further its own self-organization, which makes sense in a way. But then I'm wondering if it's all, like, I come to this point in myself, I think it's just all alive at some level of frequency. Maybe we're a higher frequency aliveness or consciousness than inorganic reality, but it does seem to exhibit those preferences, right? That for whatever reason, the ingredients of the star self-organized into this thing that then gives off a lot of light and radiance and ultimately sows the seeds for, stars manufacture all the heavier elements in the universe. So for the universe itself to evolve, according to traditional astrophysics, it needs stars to turn lighter elements into heavier elements. and then, of which we are one, right? Carbon. And so you end up like, we are the children of stardust. So like there's this reproductive process that's going through different layers as well, which is fascinating. So I end up on this ground. I've, and this is not something I coined, but this idea of monopsychism, right? That it's all one organism. And, just like each of us is made up of trillions of microorganisms that we call our one organism self, hey, I'm Robert. It's like, well, you're also trillions of all these little things. Maybe we're the microorganisms to the cosmic macroorganism. And
that's right.
I don't know, sounds very heady and out there, but like in terms of a metaphor, well, I guess I'm subscribing to the as above, so below, fractal thing. Even Pageau's definition of God, he says, first of all, it cannot be defined. So no matter what you say about God is wrong. But then the next thing he will say is like, oh, it's a communion of persons. It's the common unity of persons or actors, if we're going to use Mises's language. So maybe everything in the universe is on its own little means ends pathway. And that's what gives rise to all the multiplicity and self-organization that we see.
Absolutely. Everything's always moving. Everything is always in action. From the inorganic all the way up.
Yes. And then it's, I don't know, then we're in a teleological quandary. Like, what is the purpose of all that? Like, what's everything moving towards? Greater freedom, I guess, is what Persig would say.
That's what Persig would say. But then, then you have to get in, then you kind of enter. I mean, I think that where there might be also quandary is if you're willing to, if you're willing to see this, and as human beings, you have a choice of seeing whether our purpose is, purpose towards freedom, what value means. Does it mean, is there something neutral about it? I mean, let me see if I can explain this. Is it something that is embedded in something greater like God, or is there, an eternity? Is eternity itself like God? So that I think that then when you're talking about these things, you invariably bump up against that problem as a human being. Is this basically, does God exist or does God not exist? And then Persig would say, well, value is God, quality and God are the same thing, but he wasn't a theist.
This reflects some things that I've also wrestled with. I guess my first question would be then, in Persig as a non-theist, he would say that pure dynamic quality is God, like the ineffable. Yeah, okay. And that lands with me, like, because it's almost, well, again, if it's the one, right, of Neoplatonism, it's, and this would also be, the action of Mises, right, just pure action. And actually, there's ancient religious scholars that described God as pure action, actus purus. I don't know so much about that, but it came up in my book research. I need to do more digging on it. But this idea that,
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Actus?
Yeah, actus purus. So ACTUS, second word is purus, PURUS. The names of who did that are escaping me, but I'm sure you could find it with a quick search. But if God is this pure freedom or pure potentiality, well, then of course that can't be defined or delimited in any way, because to delimit or define it would decrement its potentiality, right? It's like only when there's absolutely nothing, right? It's almost like you're in the void, or you can't say anything about it, is possibility infinite, right? As soon as you take a step out of that and say, oh, God is this, well, then you've now come out of there's no longer infinite possibility. You're in the world of finite possibility, and that is not God. So again, not like for people that often get triggered by this word, it's not Sky Daddy,
No,
God. This is more like the principle of all creation. And again, like Peugeot says, no matter what you say about God, you're wrong. But nonetheless, we really try. Pure potentiality, pure relationality, pure freedom. All of these things kind of dance around it. Possibly also related to the three transcendentals of goodness, beauty, and truth. So yeah, what is your view on God?
It's a fun question because it's really, it's very satisfying to think about, even though it's completely that I know I'm never going to get there. But I like the idea that quality is always, because you can feel it, right? You can feel inside, like Persig says, you know what it is. So you know what's good. You know what's beautiful. So that feeling of transcendence leads me to believe that because this is what we operate in, that is a good thing. And despite any adversity or any terrible thing that happens, that substrate of value allows you to make a better choice, no matter what it is. For example, Viktor Frankl and the concentration camp. If you've read Man's Search for Meaning, it's like the worst possible circumstance, and it's transcended. You have the choice of transcending it. And I think that the fact that you are allowed to transcend says to me that I tend to go in the direction, I tend to characterize it as God. I can't characterize it as God in the social sense where it's representational of us. And I think that that's like when Peugeot says it's what did he say? A congress of
communion of persons. God is a communion of persons. Yeah.
Religion, I think, and Peugeot probably has, the one that, if I was to pick a form of Christianity, the one that makes the most sense. God has to be we have to be a representation of God on earth, because what religion is the highest, at least Peugeot's version of it is the highest, is a very high social pattern of social value. In order for people to function with God in society, it has to be characterized in a social way, which is why God becomes an expression, human beings become an expression of God. Whereas Persig's, or the alternative, is more of is the good in itself. It's not characterized in that way. It isn't manifest on earth as man. It's manifest on earth as dynamic quality. So
yes.
So maybe the answer is somewhere in between, but with a tendency towards the God side.
It's striking me here that, in the Christian tradition, God becomes man, right, in Christ. And if that seems like that would support the perspective of dynamic quality being ineffable, right? That you can't capture it just in words. So we had to have an exemplar. We had to have a role model come and demonstrate for us what godliness is, at least in the confines of human being. And that would also, connect to human action ultimately. That there's most things can't be communicated just in words or in propositions. That we actually need the role models. We need the people to imitate. The word made flesh to imitate in this case. And so that's fascinating. You could get into your religious views if you like, but like, what are your views on, God as this communion of persons, but to, a communion, as Rebecca says, it's requires a point of common unity, basically, to organize under, but it can't just be an idea. I mean, I guess it can, but you can't convey all of the data through the idea. You need the actual human actor to emulate. I don't know. What are your views on Christ and as the Word made flesh in that context?
Well, going back to Pajot, you have to have a mediator between heaven and earth. Did you get this book?
Oh yes, I've read that one. Yes, yeah. The language of creation, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I've read it. It's very good.
So it's really interesting because if you have nothing, and then God creates the first separation, which is heaven, light from darkness. There has to be, and then from that comes heaven, light is heaven, then comes heaven and earth. There needs to be a mediator between this, our consciousness, human consciousness.
Right.
So you kind of have to have, it's probably the most practical way to live, in a way, is to see human consciousness as the mediator between heaven and earth, which would imply what you're talking about, human action being the axiom, or Christ being the axiom. So it's probably a certain limitation in the sense that it's not pure dynamic quality, but it's something that allows us to function.
Right. Yeah, that lands. I mean, that's also reminding me of the Trinity, obviously, right? You've got the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Does Persig mention a mediating third in his metaphysics? Because obviously he's got static and dynamic. Is there a mediating force between the two? Does he talk about that? I don't recall.
I think it's the quality event itself. It's the relationship.
Okay.
Which isn't just humans doing it. I mean, like we were talking about, the stars do it.
Sure.
Which
it's just the unfolding of reality, or the unfolding of even non-human action. Yeah. So
I think maybe the difference in belief system is one where, or maybe that's how geocentric and heliocentric can make more sense, is one is where man is the center of it, and one is where man is part of this ongoing unfolding of quality.
Which goes back to the beginning, because man is the center of the universe in terms of what matters to us.
Yes.
But we're not the center of the universe in terms of matter.
Yeah, so, and that goes back to what you were saying of the outside force. So I guess there's not an answer to that, But the practical answer, the pragmatic answer, the one that makes sense for us, is that we kind of have to be, because this is our lens that we're seeing it through. So the abstraction of, inorganic matter in the universe is part of Persig's, is part of the origin of the evolutionary levels, and quality being the preordinate tenant. But in terms of living in the world, and us doing all this interpretation, making up metaphysics and writing books about metaphysics and economics, and even, anything that is involved in this conversation, is coming from our consciousness, which is lesser, I guess you could say, than the abstraction of quality, but at the same time has to be, because otherwise we couldn't function.
Right. There has to be a throttling or a limiting of, because we can't handle pure dynamic quality, right? It's like seeing the face of God, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. You brought up Viktor Frankl. It occurs to me too that he, like Christ would probably be the archetypal example of this, but Frankl was certainly, working at the higher end of that spectrum, that he used one of the most dire experiences you can go through as a human being. He used that as a means to the end of like really helping humans flourish, right? Humans overcome, adversity in its highest sense of the word. And so that, so because he's acting in that way, I guess you could say it's selfless, but in a way it's also selfish in a way, right? Because he was able to help himself heal from his experience in helping others. And then he leaves the world with something like logotherapy that is, something that goes on to help people even after he's gone. And yeah, I know, just like anecdotally in my own life, and I think many people experience this, like you get to a point where, it's just, you find fulfillment in helping other people, whether those are your kids, whether those are, someone you're helping in your organization or in charity. It's like you can only find this fulfillment by living life beyond yourself. And that, and again, we're back to that sort of communion of persons thing, that you can't just do it in a vacuum and expect to achieve fulfillment.
Yeah, if you want the highest quality life, that's right. And since we are, we're a mixture of all these levels.
I'll read another excerpt here because I think this is about, we've used the term quality event several times. And I think this is a passage where Persig unpacks that a bit. And I think that would hopefully be useful for the audience. And so it's slightly long, but I'll read it here. Persig writes, quote, "Values are more empirical, in fact, than subjects or objects. Any person of any philosophic persuasion who sits on a hot stove will verify, without any intellectual argument whatsoever, that he is in an undeniably low quality or low value situation, that the value of his predicament is negative. This low quality is not just a vague, woolly-headed, crypto-religious metaphysical abstraction. It is an experience. It is not a judgment about an experience. It is not a description of experience. The value itself is an experience. As such, it is completely predictable. It is verifiable by anyone who cares to do so. It is reproducible. Of all experience, it is the least ambiguous, least mistakable there is. Later, the person may generate some oaths to describe this low value, but the value will always come first, the oaths second. Without the primary low value situation, the secondary oaths will not follow. The reason for hammering on this so hard is that we have a culturally inherited blind spot here. Our culture teaches us to think it is the hot stove that directly causes the oaths. It teaches that the low values are a property of the person uttering the oaths. Not so. The value is between the stove and the oaths. Between subject and the object lies the value. This value is more immediate, more directly sensed than any quote-unquote self or any quote-unquote object to which it might be later assigned. It is more real than the hot stove. Whether the stove is the cause of the low quality or whether possibly something else is the cause is not yet absolutely certain. But that the quality is low is absolutely certain. It is the primary empirical reality from which such things as stoves and heat and oaths and self are later intellectually constructed. Once this primary relationship is cleared up, an awful lot of mysteries get solved. The reason values seem so woolly-headed to empiricists is that empiricists keep trying to assign them to subjects or objects. You can't do it. You get all mixed up because values don't belong to either group. They are separate. They are a separate category all their own. What the metaphysics of quality would do is take this separate category, quality, and show how it contains within itself both subjects and objects. The metaphysics of quality would show how things become enormously more coherent, fabulously more coherent, when you start with an assumption that quality is the primary empirical reality of the world. But showing that, of course, was a very big job. So we're back to just the betweenness. I mean, it seems to be like one of the best words. Relationality is another one, but maybe slightly more obscure, to describe everything that we can experience, right? Even, again, there's no words we can muster that aren't relational. Even things as, quote unquote, objective as mathematics are relational. And our experience even is this, what is he saying here? Like just the immediacy, the pre-intellectual immediate experience of sitting on that hot stove is the source of all things. But we, over time, I guess, forget that the oaths come after the stoves. And then we start thinking that our maps are superordinate to the territory or are the territory or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the best example.
Is that the quality event? Was that
Yes.
Was that the passage that describes? Okay.
Yeah, well, the event was the moment that the low quality was perceived.
Yes.
Even before that. Because once you perceive it, it becomes in the past, right? It's no longer the quality event. The quality event is almost timeless. Or, it happens in the timeless space. And afterwards, you analogize the pain on your butt with the swearing. And you curse the stove for being hot. But you're not thinking hot. You're not thinking, whatever profanity you're about to utter. You just have that experience of you and the stove, that relationship. And so, I mean, what's your thoughts about that?
No, that lands for me as well. And it's just that if we want to get it to the immediacy of it, it's that raw transfer of energy. Again, we can only talk in terms of things, right? So let's say like the raw transfer of energy between the stove and the butt, but it's the relationality that's primary, right? It's like, well, the butt and the stove are already in relation with the whole universe indirectly. And then when they come into immediate relation, that's when the experiencer has this, don't want to do that again. That was low value. And it speaks again just to the Darwinian aspect of self-preservation.
Absolutely. Because
it also exists between layers, but it also exists between individuals and their experience.
Absolutely. Because a baby who experiences pain has no idea where it came from. All that baby knows is pain. It's only later that they learn that pain is heat and you have to avoid things that are too hot.
Yes. And then it gets even more interesting. Now I'm thinking of fire, right? As like the primordial energy technology. How many of our ancestors had that low value experience of fire,
right?
Before we figured out, oh, actually, this is really important. Like we probably developed a lot of fear towards it for a long time before we figured out how to overcome that fear and harness fire, and then, further our own interest biologically, socially, intellectually.
No, I think that's right.
So there's a very special place called the Farm at Okefenokee. It's a 1,000-acre regenerative farm community about 45 minutes northwest of Jacksonville, Florida. The farm is a completely off-grid community. It has total food, water, and energy independence. Everything on the farm is 100% organic, and it even features wild boar and bear hunting. The farm at Okefenokee is right next to the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, where you can do camping and canoeing tours. So if you're like me and you're interested in the self-sovereign lifestyle, then you can get your own lot on the farm at Okefenokee if you tell them that I sent you. Once you get a lot, you can build one of 3 custom cabin options. So if you value freedom, self-sovereignty, and living in touch with nature, then join me and my family. We have lot number 21, and we're going to be building a cabin there starting December 2025. To learn more about the farm at Okefenokee, go to okefarm.com and make sure to tell them that I sent you. If you're a Bitcoiner, you need the Orange Pill app. It's where you can connect with other sovereign individuals locally and globally. It's great for when you travel, to meet local Bitcoiners, to go to Bitcoin meetups, and to find local merchants that accept sats. No distractions, no noise, just real Bitcoiners. So download the Orange Pill app today and find your local Bitcoin tribe. Yeah, and I want to maybe try to ground some of this for people. Because this, obviously this type of conversation can get very head in the clouds, philosophical very quickly. And you're like, what are you talking about? How does this matter? And so I think about this a lot. Like, okay, if we could somehow, give people the download of Persigian metaphysics, let's say, or the, maybe it's both. Maybe it's, the economic understanding of Mises and his praxeology, and it's Persig's metaphysics of quality, and it's Gibsonian affordances, like all these non-subject-object duality frameworks. We could just distill those and give people the download. What do you think the tangible impact on their lives and their patterns of action would be? Like, how would this change people? How would this show up in people's embodied experience?
Well, I think Persig, he's in Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. He said there was this pre-Socratic, the pre-Socratics lived under their guiding force was excellence, and so they arete. So they would live as that great, that's value, as arete being the highest value, what they were, doing things right, from that early word RTA, rita, right. It seems like the big transition would be to do things right versus doing things efficiently or for profit. I mean, and I know that you, I don't want to say that profit is a bad thing. I understand, the difference because you outlined it so well, that profit itself isn't a bad thing, but profit is the only thing. Maybe is something that could change, because if you're just following that, if you're just following, making, paper money or making money on, then you're removing yourself so far from quality. You're just following something that isn't real.
Yes.
So
it's a very valid point, because you could say that central banking is the most profitable business model there is. You're literally printing money with no cost. But clearly it's very divorced from ethicality and these other dimensions that matter.
And maybe we've been, hypnotized to believing that being very wealthy is, and I think people are, that's what you want to achieve. So this point of view would say, well, there are things that are more valuable than that. That money is a practical tool, that you need it in the society we live in. We've got a very good social pattern of value. That is, you can condense your labor into a token, and that's a high quality pattern. And that doesn't mean you get rid of it, but it means you put it in perspective, which I think you've said a lot in your work. And you don't, you don't forget what real quality is, and that heading towards efficiency, heading towards profit isn't necessarily a quality life. That maybe some of the things, like you were saying, that these meditation practices, or, remembering what real quality is. And I think people know it. The thing is, I think people know how to do this, but we've been hypnotized to believe that this other thing is more valuable. And going back a little bit, I don't mean going back to the past, because you can't do that. But, you know, you see all this technology going in a way that's really getting out of control. Especially when there's these new fake human agents whose basis aren't in quality. Their basis are in, you know, this other way of thinking, the materialistic way of thinking. So maybe reclaiming a different, a more quality oriented way of seeing things. And I think that, you know, I know it's tough to expect people to read these two books and grasp them immediately, and because, you know, they're really tough, and our attention spans are worse than they ever have been. But fortunately, did you get this?
No, I don't have that one.
This is really good. It's only 100 and Persig's widow, put it's 130 pages, and it really distills everything to something that's so wonderful to read. And
the book you're holding up, just for the audio listeners,
it's On Quality by Robert M. Pirsig, edited by Wendy K. Persig, and it came out the 50th anniversary, more or less, of 5 years after he died, right around the 50th anniversary of the publication of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And it's not only the best, you know, the most coherent passages for understanding Persig's work, but a lot of new stuff, and a lot of his original thinking, and more of his understanding of how meditation, Zen meditation for him, could help you connect with this raw quality experience and help it guide you in life versus the things that we have come, you know, in Western society to value more than quality.
Yeah, I do want to read that book. I'm going to order it right after this.
Oh, it's so great. You'll love it. And just as an aside, this guy, Rick Rubin.
Oh, yeah.
This is right along the same lines. These are more practical applications to doing some of that stuff.
And the title of that book is?
The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. And what he said was, it was a book that was supposed to teach people how to make art, but it ends up teaching people how to live. And it goes so well with Persig's work.
Okay. That I will check out both of those. Thank you for the recommendations.
Sure. So for me personally, those are the grounding books that I'm looking at these days that are helping me navigate all this crazy, you know, this craziness in so many ways.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I've thought about the same question, because, you know, it's a very practical question. Like, okay,
yeah, I'd love to
philosophizing about.
I'd love to know what your thoughts are.
Well, I wrestle with. I don't. You know, it feels enjoyable to me. First of all, like that's why I do it in the first place. It's like it's a place for your curiosity to flow. I feel like I'm getting closer to something that is, you know, meta true, if that's even a way to put it. But you just feel like you're coming into closer contact with both yourself and reality at the same time, and the progress of that journey is intrinsically enjoyable to me. I don't know that it's for everyone necessarily, because not everyone's going to sit around and read these books and, you know, philosophize and go through all the trouble of, you know, picking up the new language and mental models. It is actually quite a bit of work. But going back to that question of, like, if you could just give people this download, what would it be like? And in many ways, that's maybe this is a purpose of philosophy. Like, again, we're talking about, we're all children of Descartes, as I've heard Vervaeke say, right? We're all looking at the world through the lens of subjects and objects, because some guy several hundred years ago, you know, said, I think, therefore I am. And then, you know, hundreds of years later, we're all looking at the world that way. And so maybe that is one of the things philosophy is doing, is it's creating that cultural inheritance for people to just, you know, put on an interpretive structure to deal with the world. And that's, you know, surely there's some value in that, right? Like, subject object has been useful in the scientific domain. I think we're probably at the end of its utility by now, right? Like now that we've gotten into the quantum and these other areas.
Well,
but I do think
now that you see, for example, the environment falling apart because it's gone too far.
Yes.
And I don't mean,
exactly.
like, heat tree hugging stuff. I mean, seriously, when toxins are in, everywhere, for example.
Yes. Agreed. And a lot of those, well, let's see if I can come back to that, because what I was going to say is like one of the valuable things about learning, let's say this type of non-subject object metaphysics, even in just the term quality or value itself, how Persig talks about how it resists definition, it's ineffable, it's closer to the raw experience of what is. That alone, giving people a reverence for the ineffable or the limitations of knowledge, I think that alone is incredibly valuable for people. Like in a world where, we're post-pandemic here, where everyone was saying, trust the science and, these are objective facts. People like say something and then say, oh, this is objectively factual, as if there's no more argument or dialogue to be associated with that idea. And all of that, it's truly oxymoronic, because science itself is a systematic method of questioning. So when you say trust the science, you're saying don't question the science. You're saying don't science the science. And it's like, it's just, you're off into nonsense very quickly. But if we had a society that was grounded in this metaphysics of quality, or, it's adjacent frameworks, as we've talked about, then people wouldn't do that, right? They'd be like, oh no, of course, no matter what knowledge we gain, it's always provisional and that's the point of knowledge, actually. It's like, it's a scaffolding, right? We're building up closer to our aims or purposes, but the idea is always to get, to make that another level below the next level. As with scaffolding, right? You don't build scaffolding to the final level and say, this is it, we're done. It's like, well, it goes as high as it needs to go towards whatever the aim is. And so, I don't know, this giving people this reverence for the ineffable and perhaps giving them more autonomy and confidence to just be, in touch with their own raw experience, their own quality events. And, you wouldn't have this blind trust in authority. Like if someone's telling you to do something and it doesn't feel right, like, well, it doesn't feel right for a reason. You should trust that.
That's right.
And,
yeah.
So maybe, it's a deeper appreciation for these other modes of knowing, which seems incredibly valuable. And it's just something we have severed ourselves from in the modern age.
It's very true.
And then, yeah, I think to the extent people appreciated more of the affordances view on reality, that it is real fitness relationships or real possibilities for action that are primary, and then we're sort of putting the categories on top of that, it would create a much deeper appreciation for the work of Mises. And Austrian economics would go from being some fringe science that's literally it's not included in any mainstream university curriculum, to being it'd be foundational, almost philosophically so, right? That human action is this primary thing. And from that, we get means, ends, pathways, we get time preference, we get the natural interest rate. You would just have a world that was much more suspect of social institutions like the state and the central bank and all of those things. So
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And the state really, the pandemic was such a catastrophe because there wasn't any room for dynamic quality. It was a total cultural immune system. There was a narrative, and the narrative had to be protected at all costs. So there was no chance for something else, for something better to come in.
Yes. And I would, the freedom of speech, right? Almost being as like an embodiment of dynamic quality.
Yes.
And a lot of people know this intuitively, but people get overly intellectualized and like, oh, well, we need a little censorship here, a little censorship there. And it's like if you had this as your core metaphysics, you would always revere the freedom of speech. You would never want to censor anyone, right? That would be an inhibition on dynamic quality expressing itself. Or to say it in more scientific jargon, like it would be a limitation on data throughput. And so people would really value more discourse, more dialogue, more even contentious, argumentation. That's all wonderful in terms of cohering society in a way that conforms to what is most true. It's been said, one of my favorite definitions of the freedom of speech is that the freedom of speech exists so that our thoughts and ideas can go to battle and die so that our bodies don't have to. All right, that we could really appreciate how miraculous of a tool that is to resolve our disputes non-violently in the propositional layer before we have to, and then when we censor those things, we're actually pushing ourselves towards violence.
That's right.
And so, it's what I guess we could say is this is a freedom maximalizing philosophy. Mm-hmm. And so,
freedom maximalizing philosophy. I love that.
Yeah, it seems,
but also
universally valuable.
A value pattern, a high quality pattern valuing philosophy as well. You've got to you value the patterns, the things that have come before that work, and you update them.
That's right. Yeah. That's absolutely correct, because you also get the relation between the dynamic and static quality. And the again, it's a little, I like the ratcheting mechanism, the metaphor Persig uses, right? It's like as reality becomes more complexified, it's the dynamic quality that's sort of self-organizing and exploring. But in that inherently experimental process, oftentimes it goes the wrong way, and so it will fail. Mm-hmm. And then the static layers behind it provide kind of like a latching mechanism. Like it won't fail too far below that layer where it had previously latched. I'm sorry, not latched. I think he used a ratcheting metaphor. Yeah, ratcheting.
These layers
metaphor.
Support us. These old patterns that work support us. So we can't be free, because if you have total freedom without these patterns, you live a life like Leila is the protagonist. Yeah. That's her life. If you have nothing but patterns and laws and rules, you rebel. You're the stodgy counterpart to Leila.
Yes. Yes, you have to have the dynamic interplay between the two, right? You can't, if you're purely static, then you're just the rigid tyrant. Mm-hmm. And if you're purely dynamic, then you're just lost soul. Yeah, something like that. I want to ask you, this is just a kind of a meta question, but it's another one that I wrestle with. I just wanted to hear your views on it. So we started this conversation with, Peterson establishing this delta between interpreting the world as made up of matter or as made up of what matters. And clearly that domain of what matters, also called meaning, as I think you said it. What is the meaning of meaning? I'm sorry to do that to you, but it is something that I think about a lot, and I wanted to hear your views.
Okay, meaning, I think it's the quality event. I think it's when that happens. I would put it right back to square one. It's let's just say it's the moment after the quality event.
Let's say the point of experience, the pure present.
Yeah.
Right. There's no past, there's no future, just purely in the present. That would be the source of meaning. But then we can also look back on things and say, oh, that was meaningful, or look forward to meaningful experience. So how does meaning then go from just that pure point of raw experience? And because another sense of the word meaning that I think about that's interesting is like informational meaning. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, if the sentence is arranged properly, then it has meaning, and if it's not, then it doesn't. So like how does meaning go from that point of pure presence or eternity, even, where it's no space, no time, into the temporal domain?
Well, those are the analogies, like the analogies you make once the quality event hits. You make meaning of it. for example, the stove is hot, you know, quality event, low quality event. The meaning is heat, and then stove, and then bad, oaths. So in a negative, so that's an example of low, you know, making meaning of low quality. But I think you might also be talking about making maybe a meaningful life is maybe what you're looking at. Or
well, I really looking at you know, I guess meaning obviously has multiple senses, and I guess I'm kind of looking for the through line between them, if there is one. I could share the senses that I've thought about.
Okay,
feel free to include others.
Yeah.
One's the informational that I just shared, right? Like if the sentence has a proper syntactic structure, then it conveys just objective meaning, if you will, right? If the phone number is in the right order, then it's meaningful. If it's out of order, well, then I can't, you know, it's meaningless, basically. You know, a tracking number on a package. If you miss one, you transpose 2 digits in that tracking number, then it's meaningless. But if it's in the right order, then it's meaningful, right? In terms of giving you the information that helps satisfy your aim, something like that.
Well, that might be like the definition of truth that he puts forth, logical coherence. If you're talking about truth, meaning as truth, then I think that his definition is great.
Yes, logical coherence,
logical consistency. But there's, you know, you read them. I don't remember all of them, but how he illustrates truth, I think, is maybe what you mean.
I think that those are definitely in the same category. The other sense of the word meaning, again, trying to through line these different senses together, is something like where when intention and outcome are either convergent or divergent. So if you accidentally bump into someone, you might say, "Oh, I didn't mean to do that." You'd be like, "You didn't intentionally do that," so that well, you didn't mean to do it, right? Now, if you meant to do it, well, then you're probably being mean to them, which is maybe just another play on words. But it's when your intended course of means ends pathway matches up to what actually happens, right? Then that's meaningful. And if it's divergent, then it's, well, you didn't mean to, something like that. So it's about intentionality, I guess. And then the other one is just, you know, significance. When people say, what is the meaning of life? You know, it's like significance, purpose. What's another word for that? I'm not sure. The you know, more of that transcendental sort of sense of meaning, right? Like having a meaningful life, as you said. So I guess I'm just curious about the connection between those, if any, or is that just a linguistic coincidence?
I don't think, you know, I mean, Persig kind of pointed out how, you know, etymology itself results in concepts that have a similar core, right? So it probably isn't a coincidence. But I would say you know, you and John had talked about that hamartia, right?
Yeah, missing the mark.
Yeah. So so intentionality would be something very pure, right?
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's very hard. Intention's very mysterious.
Yeah, it is.
You know, it's like
fumbling around with that word.
Yeah, well, where did it come from, right? Did you originate it? Were you influenced by someone? Are you imitating someone? You know, you try to trace that one backwards. You get very quickly into like what the identity of the self and the I and all these things. It's tricky.
Well, I think that, you know, if you have an intention and it doesn't work out, then you kind of have to update, you know, your understanding. Like you think that this is the best outcome, but it doesn't work out. So what are you going to learn from that? So intention, I think that it can be a great thing if it's moving you in the right direction, integrating a dynamic quality, or it can be a terrible thing if you absolutely insist that this preconceived notion be executed at all costs. So maybe you almost, like intentionality, good would be being willing to update as the circumstance goes, and evil would be making it happen no matter what.
I see. So
Potentially
the allowance for dynamic quality and feedback, to the openness to change, I guess, which is, I don't know, humility. Which again, back to the earlier idea, if you were not that, if you were the opposite of that, and you were just, you had totalizing, you identified with yourself as a source of totalized knowledge. It's like, oh, you can't learn anything, right? You can't learn anything if you think if you know it all. So that totalitarian, yeah, that's interesting. So the totalitarian is not open to meaning, and that's why they create such destructive experiences for people.
Yeah.
So you've done some work on Carl Jung's, or you've I don't know, like in your practice, you've explored the work of Carl Jung. Was Jordan Peterson your introduction to Carl Jung as well, or had you been looking into him before Peterson?
Well, I mean, in terms of trying to understand him, that was one of the reasons. There were two reasons I went to Peterson. One was, because meaning was in his, was in the byline, was in the title of his, that's the word that made me start listening to him. Once you, if you don't know who he is back then, if you didn't know who he was and you come across one of these lectures, they're just mind blowing. He was such a great professor, amazing professor. But also, I think that I didn't know much about Carl Jung, but I've listened to all his lectures and learned quite a bit, and then started reading Jung myself. So he kind of was in my introduction to Jung in any real sense. How about for you?
I'm very secondhand, actually. I haven't read much of Carl Jung, and most of my exposure to his thinking is through Peterson, and some of the other people Peterson has opened me up to. Have you seen any analog in some of the Jungian psychological models and Persigian metaphysics? Is there overlap in terms of, I don't know, flow, intuition, archetypes, etc.?
That's a tough one. I haven't thought about it that much. I probably, because I don't really, but you certainly have archetypes in his novels. And you could read his novels, I think, in a Jungian way, especially Leila or Leila. I think you could absolutely pin down those characters, in archetypal ways. But no, I haven't done much exploration in that direction. I really see them as kind of different.
I see. You've talked with Vervaeke a lot about this. I don't know if he's read Persig or not, but it seemed like you guys had a lot of commonality between kind of his Neoplatonic views and Persig. Do you think there's a lot of overlap there?
Yeah, I think that Persig said that the philosopher he has the most in common with is Plotinus, who I see. Now, I'm not. Plotinus is hard, so I don't know much about him. I'm studying him right now, but that the good is at the bottom of everything is, I think, is, that's Platonism, but Plotinus was more experiential. Plato kind of, from what I can understand, and I've had some Plato reading groups, Plato had stopped short of, there was a way of conceptualizing the good in terms of how the forms manifest. So there's, like, I would say Plato and Jung have something in common in that sense. But the forms, from what I can tell, isn't part of Plotinus, and I don't know enough about this, but it seems to me from what I've read that the forms and conceptualizing things are not part of the essential experience. With Plotinus, it's the essential connection with the good. with the one. And to me, that's the same as the essential connection with quality, and that the substrate of Neoplatonism and the substrate of the metaphysics of quality is so similar.
Which is the quality event being like the interface with the one. And that's, again, that lands so well with action, just being, before you can say anything about that which you've done, you have to do it.
Makes sense.
Interesting. Has it showed up at all? Last question. Sorry, I'm just curious if has any of Persig's work, has it changed your therapeutic practice? Has it changed your views on any of your work? Like, how's it changed you or changed your work? Like, how have you seen this philosophy show up in your life?
I think that integrating some kind of transcendence into very hard situations for people can be really useful. And if you do it, and Persig, you can do it without getting into the religious, because modern people, and I work at, my practice is in an urban center. So it's not a particularly religious cohort. But the transcendent can really help put things in perspective, that there's something bigger that you're ensconced in, and these things that are happening are not the ultimate, something terrible that happens now is not the ultimate terrible thing, that there is a way to transcend it and go beyond it. So yeah, I definitely consciously or unconsciously integrate it all the time, because that's the lens I see things through now. So there's no other way to do it.
Amazing. Well, Sevilla, thank you for staying with me for so long. Sorry to do these. We do long conversations, and obviously these ideas need a lot of room to breathe.
Well, I'm so happy that you have this podcast and that you're conveying these ideas to people, because a lot of people watch you and look up to you, and so if you are embracing and conveying these ideas, it's only going to make the world better, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yeah, I hope so. I mean, whatever I can do to, what did Steve Jobs say about putting a dent in the universe? Like, whatever you can do to help push it in the right direction.
Yeah, that's right.
Sure gives me a lot of, my curiosity gets a lot of satisfaction out of it. And, it's very enjoyable, and I get to talk to wonderful, smart people like yourself. So it's not a bad gig.
Well, your project is just great. I love it.
Thank you so much. Where, if you have any closing words of wisdom, please feel free to share. If not, could you please let people know where they can find you on the internet? Yeah, my channel's A Quality Existence. I didn't do a lot of stuff for a long time. I'm getting back into it, but it's awkward. I can relate. I'm trying, but I'm kind of working out ideas. It's not really very coherent, or right now I'm just working out ideas. I'm doing the same thing I did when I started. I've got some new things I'm looking at, like some of the things I showed you, and trying to work them out and holding myself accountable by getting back into the channel. So not as much as I'd like to be doing, but I plan to bump it up a bit. And awesome. I totally recommend, like people who don't like to, who don't really want to handle anything hard. These two really are easy reads. I mean, this is just little short chapters, like 2-3 pages. Oops. Oh, wow. You can't see it, but and again, that's the Rick. I forgot Rick Rubin's the title of that book. The Creative Act. The Creative Act, and the other one was On Quality. Yeah, and they're really helpful to kind of get yourself in this mindset. Beautiful. Okay. Sevilla, thank you so much. Thanks, Robert. It was really nice to talk to you and meet you. We lock our doors, we encrypt our hard drives, and we use strong passwords. But most people leave one thing wide open: their phone line. SIM swap attacks are one of the fastest growing methods of digital theft. In minutes, a hacker can clone your accounts, reset your passwords, and drain your life. Unfortunately, this is not science fiction. It happens every single day. Efani is the only mobile service protection designed exclusively to protect you from SIM swap attacks. Efani offers military-grade encryption on their product and offers up to $5 million of SIM swap insurance. And to date, there have been exactly 0 SIM swaps on any of Efani's over 50,000 protected accounts. So you don't need to live in fear, you just need to protect your weakest link. Go to efani.com/breedlove to secure your phone line today. Again, that's Efani, EFANI.com/breedlove. For the past 25 years, I've been reading roughly 1 book per week. Almost entirely difficult nonfiction books, the kind that really shift your thinking. Books on physics, money, power, psychology, spirituality, and philosophy. The real stuff. But I get it. Most people don't have time to read 50 books per year. So I hand-selected my favorite nonfiction books and distilled each one of them into a course that you can take in 50 to 100 times faster than it would take you to read the entire book. Each course gives you the key insights, mental models, and frameworks that matter. We launched with 15 book courses, and we are building toward a library of 100 by the end of year 1. So if you are a seeker of truth, wisdom, and personal growth, then my book course is for you. To sign up, go to course.breedlove.io. Again, that's course.breedlove.io. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money. And be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.